What's up guys, I'm Phoenix Master 1 and welcome to my unit review and in-depth analysis of the Ninja banner featuring Ninja Lucina, Tharja, Diamant, Celine, and Noire. I'll also be going over the new skills and how you can make use of them as fodder. So let us begin with the start of this banner in Duo Lucina. So this time she is a ninja with her father and she is a colorless bow cavalier with Elise ninja bow as an 8 might dual phase brave weapon. It also gives her -1 special cooldown, so curve shot is a 1 cooldown special, and if she initiates combat or if she's within 2 spaces of an ally, then she can get extra stats depending on 5 plus 15% of her visible speed. So this is going to be somewhere around Omni 13 to 14, and then she gets true damage based on X multiplied by 5. So this can go up to max 25, and this X depends on the number of bonus status active on her and the number of penalty status active on the foe. And with her future focus and speed defense detect, she's able to fulfill this condition and get a good amount of true damage, and 25 true damage on a brave bow unit is really strong, especially a unit with 45 base attack and 48 base speed with a super boon. She also has 50% damage reduction piercing, so she doesn't really need Deadeye, and then she has got Null Guard, which allows her to trigger curve shot even easily, and she does get cooldown -1 jump after she has triggered her first special in a combat. So this means that you can have back-to-back curve shots, which can really help you nuke much better, and because she has got a brave weapon, she's easily going to be able to trigger it again. She does come with future focus, which is the big thing that makes her a crazy unit and so versatile. So it is basically a much better future vision. It allows her to swap places and then gives her another action. Keep in mind that she doesn't really have any kind of isolation inflicted on her, and technically you could use it again, but you're only going to be getting another action once per turn. And that also includes the extra action you get out of her duo button. So even if you can move again after using her duo button, it doesn't mean that you're going to be getting another action with her future focus. So that's something that you need to keep in mind. And it grants the following to herself, the target ally, and to the allies in 2 spaces of both of them for 1 turn. And you get -1 special cooldown pulse. So this is a much better version of duochrome support. And this allows you to pre-charge specials easily, which is an amazing thing for a cavalier like her. And this also means that you have got a lot of utility for pre-charging AoE specials and other specials, and she's able to pre-charge her curve shot with this, and she also gives out the null follow-up status and also the new future witness status, which is a crazy busted effect. So this status has got multiple effects built in it. It enables Canto too, so this is incredibly good for positioning, even if you're not running something like Emblem Secret Ring on your units. And then it also gives you +5 to all of your stats. It also has 7 flat damage reduction on the first attacks, including the brave hits of the enemy. And you also get a scale effect, but only on your player phase. So this kind of scale effect in the player phase is something that we're seeing a bit more nowadays. Ashe also had this, and this can pretty much allow your range unit who might not be that bulky to live the enemy because of the scale effect. But keep in mind that this is not really going to be helping you against defensive specials like dual ice mirrors of Duo Fiorm, because you cannot scale the defensive specials. You can only scale the offensive specials. So this is a great support that she can give out to her other allies, and she's a really strong nuke, but with time her firepower may fall off and her support is what is going to be staying. And we have seen how these Chromes and Lucina's still stay a bit more relevant because of their unique assist skill, and this one is just on another level when it comes to the sheer amount of effects that she can give because of future witness and also giving you the special cooldown pulse. So this is what makes her a versatile and a top tier unit. Being a duo unit, she has got a duo skill which can refresh her and give her another action. So this helps with the action economy, and if she had used Canto, then it re-enables it. So that is amazing, and this can only be used after she has entered the combat. This is something I got wrong in my first impression of this. I didn't read this line. So yeah, you need to enter into the combat to make use of this. And this also gives her the Colosseum scoring of 215 BST, which is quite a bit of bump from 205 BSTs. So we're going to be seeing her quite a lot in Arena, and she is going to be quite an annoying unit to face because many times she's going to be having Emblem Celica on her so that she can warp even though there's some kind of trench blocking her way. So this kind of duo skill is really helpful in Summoner Duels to give her more action economy, and with Shadow Shift it has so much utility because you can reposition a unit in your canto with Shadow Shift, and it is the perfect skill for a unit like this. She also has a new line of skill in Speed Defense Detect, so this branches off from the Snag skill, and this is only inedible to the non-healer, cavalry, and flying units. So unfortunately infantry units are not going to be having access to it. This is an interesting skill because unlike a Snag skill, it doesn't really debuff the opponent with a visible debuff. Instead, it only has the in-combat debuffs. So you're going to be inflicting -4 speed and defense debuff on the foe in the combat, and if you use a movement assist skill or if you're targeted by it, then you're going to be inflicting the exposure status on the closest foes in 5 spaces and in 2 spaces of both unit and target ally for 1 turn. So this kind of splash debuff with exposure has incredibly large range, and this also has a fantastic supportive effect because it is going to be essentially giving you the lull speed defense -5 on any kind of your ally as long as the enemy on the map has got exposure status on them. So this can actually work for the other allies on your team, and this does stack if you have multiple units with detect skill. So you're going to be inflicting even more debuffs on them, and keep in mind that this is something that is going to be susceptible to the feud effect. So this skill doubles down on the support in a really unique way by giving the dull speed defense to your allies, which is going to be helping a lot of the fast tanks. So this skill is going to be useful on many of the units, but unfortunately it is going to be really expensive to fodder. So this is useful on Rearm Lucina. So not only she can use the skill with her future sight to a really good degree, but also help you duplicate it, and she also gets Shadow Shift 4 at the same time, and she also loves that skill, and future sight already gives her the treachery support. So this way she's able to inflict exposure status on the enemy and just hit incredibly hard with the true damage. Again, keep in mind that you're not going to be getting the actual visible debuff, so the sabotage effect on the Arcane Thrima is not really going to be having any kind of visible debuff to go off of compared to the Snag skill that she comes with. She does have a lot of tools now with the new skills that we've got, and you can also give this to Marin, so she can also get true damage out of her weapon, and this is going to be giving her even more true damage. And you could always use momentum with her, but this is a way of supporting and doubling down on that with her reposition and her extraction, and she of course loves Shadow Shift as well. You can also give this to Nidavellir, who also loves both of those skills, and the exposure does get added into the AoE special, unlike something like Assassin Strike, which many people try and run on him. So I could see him being used in Summoner Duels, and with Reposition and Shadow Shift, he can also help you in the openers. You could also run this on Duo Thor, and she's also one of the staples in Summoner Duels. So with Emblem Secret Ring, you don't really need to run any kind of trace skill, so you could run Detect skill. A lot of people do run Snag skill on her in Summoner Duels, so this is something you could run. Now, some people might say that this is going to be overlapping with her weapon, and you would be right, but keep in mind that Attune Micaiah and Ninja Celine are going to be really common in Summoner Duels, and exposure is one of the higher priority status effects that is going to be getting cleansed. So once it gets cleansed, you can then inflict the exposure again with the Detect skill, because this is the mid-turn debuff. Another reason why a Detect skill is really good on any kind of unit that can inflict the exposure status is because you don't have to make use of the assist skill to get the lull speed defense going out of it. As long as the enemy has got exposure status, it doesn't matter if you've used the Detect skill or not. As long as they've got that status, you're going to be enjoying the support out of it. So in a way, because of her weapon, running this skill does open up the support even if you don't use her assist skill, and even if the enemy doesn't cleanse it. You could also run this on a smite bot like Naga, who doesn't really have many things going for her as an Astro Mythic. So if she's part of your Mythic core, then this is something you could try and run and use Divine Fang and the Detect skill to give even more support. And this can help you in tanking and also finishing off the opponents, and even in the Gale Force teams. And you could also run this on your Regan, who also loves Shadow Shift at the same time, having that counter 3, and Detect skill does allow her to have some really useful support. And if you're not going to be running Wings of Mercy for her, then this is a really good slot-based skill that you could run for her just for adding more support. Coming back to Ninja Lucina, she is going to be a staple for many of the competitive teams, and she's useful in pretty much every single game mode, maybe except for Aether Raids defense, because there you're going to be under the control of AI, and the AI does not really use the assist skills offensively, so setting a future focus might be a bit more tricky there and a bit more annoying, but outside of that, she's going to be always providing you support, and she does have good enough nuking power with her true damage and her dual phase brave weapon to hit really hard, and she might struggle against some of the shield fighter saves a bit at times, but she does have the tool with future focus in its special charging, so that can enable you to use something like Miracle to try and survive and then hit them with the 4th hit. And against the 4th hit, the shield fighter armors are not going to be having any kind of damage reduction, so she can do it a bit more easily than a lot of the other units that rely on Miracle to survive the shield fighter armors, and specifically Duo Lucina. For building up Lucina on a budget, you could simply give her Blade Session Secret Seal for maximizing her offenses. That is going to be the key for dealing with a lot of the insane tanks that we have got nowadays. And you could try and run Emblem Celica with your curved shot, as it is going to be helping you just teleport over the trench tiles and still have better mobility, and it also helps you power up your specials by a bit. And as I was talking about running Miracle against the shield fighter Far Saviors, it is something you could try and run, and you can use Emblem Marth to make it into a 3 cooldown Miracle, and then you could use her future focus once, and she's going to be pulsing herself down to 2 cooldown, and because of her brave weapon, she's going to be just pre-charging her Miracle to brace against the shield fighter armor like Duo Lucina, and then she's going to be surviving and proceeding to quad attack if you're fast enough, which is going to be really important. And the shield fighter armors don't really get the damage reduction against the 4th hit of a quad attack, so that's where you can try and kill them. And Miracle might seem really weird at first on such an offensive unit, but you're going to be seeing that quite a lot with these ninja units and with units with brave weapons in general, because it is your main way of surviving against the shield fighter armors and then trying to kill them. And Duo Lucina just does so much damage with her damage reflection that you kind of need this to survive. And the good thing is that Ninja Lucina already has such high damage output with her true damage and the brave weapon that you can still kill a lot of tanks despite running Miracle. And you could try and stack up more true damage with something like Slice with Sparrow, which honestly I like it more than Flared Sparrow. It is going to be a bit expensive, but it is definitely the best Lottie skill for Lucina, and she already gives herself the 2 visible status effects, so it's pretty easy to trigger its true damage condition. And Flared Sparrow does have the advantage of overriding something like an ice terrain, but like I said, overall I do like Slice with Sparrow a bit more on her. It gives you a bit more true damage, and that does help with a quad attacking unit like her. You can keep Detect and Shadow Shift, it is amazing with her kit, and Miracle is a defensive special, and keep in mind the enemy's Scowl is not going to be helping against Miracle. You can easily try and pre-charge this with her assist skill. She does it a lot more easily for a Cavalier compared to a lot of the other units, and she can also help other units do the same if they have a similar kit. So this is the build you're going to be seeing in Summoner Duels quite a lot, because Shield Fighter Far Saviors are really common, and Duo Lucina is the best Far Savior right now. And I feel like plus speed IV is going to be her best IV, and if you're going to be ascending something, then definitely go for the attack. And if you end up plus and merging her, then she can try and run this max build with Slice with Sparrow and her base kit, and there she can try and score like a 220 BST unit. Ninja Tharja is a Red Mage Cavalier this time with Scroll of Curses as her 9 might prayer phase brave weapon. This does have minus on special cooldown, and it also has Canto Distant Traveled built in, so you don't really need to run Emblem Sigurd Ring, and this does give her max Canto 3, so it's really good for retreating. And at start of turn, if her HP is at or above 25%, then she's going to be giving herself and the allies in 2 spaces the +6 attack and speed buff and the new Anathema status. So Anathema status is basically a hold skill that gives you the -4 speed, defense, and resistance debuff on the foes that are in 3 spaces of the unit in the combat. And keep in mind that this does stack with each instance of Anathema. So you could have your entire team get this buff, and as long as all of them are together, and as long as the enemy is going to be within 3 spaces of them, you're going to be stacking up the debuffs onto the enemy, which makes it a really powerful thing for Aether Raids defense and also for Summoner Duels, especially for the Summoner Duels teams using Assign Decoy, Brave Sorin, and the teams that like to be together in a ball. So this kind of status can be really underrated because you could get like double-digit debuffs on the enemies quite easily with your team, and it would have been a lot more insane if it also debuffed the enemy's attack. But still, this can also be helpful for many of the fast tanks and the fast far saviors and near saviors to get the debuff on the enemy. And nowadays we have many bulky units with Lagu's Friend, with Shield Fighter, so they could just stay together and take advantage of it, while nukes like Ninja Tharja, Brave Felix, Emblem Sigurd could just go in on the enemy team and make it really annoying for the enemy team to go into and attack your team. She also gives out the special charges status to herself and the allies, so again, this is going to be helping you tech against the Shield Fighter far saviors with Miracle, but she doesn't really have Null Guard like Ninja Lucina. Still, this is really helpful, and offensively this can also help you trigger specials on your Brave hits, and this also helps your allies quite a lot, especially if they have some kind of tempo or Null Guard. And if she initiates combat or if the foe's HP is at or above 75%, then she's able to get the Desperation effect in the combat, and she is really fast at base 47 speed. So she's going to be able to quad quite easily, but Hardy Bearing is going to be present on many of the save tanks and on many of the slower tanks, but a lot of times you could try and have more true damage on her so that she can finish off the enemies in her initial 2 Brave attacks. You also get extra attack and speed depending on 6 plus 20% of her visible speed, and this can be anywhere from 16 to 18 depending on your investments. And Ninja Tharja is not only a really powerful Brave attacking nuke, but she also provides the Anathema status, which, like I said, does help the more of the defensive teams in a way that like to stay together, as it can stack up. She does have 46 base attack with a super boon, which is going to be helping you in nuking, and she also has good enough HP to make use of resonance. She does bring a new skill in Slice to Sparrow, which is going to be inheritable to everyone except for the healers. So this is going to be a player phase skill, which gives you plus 8 attack and speed, and it also has the guaranteed follow-up attack built in it. So this might seem a bit weird on a fast skill like this, but for many of the ranged flyers and cavaliers, they don't really have easy access to null follow-up. So you can try and run this so that you can get the pseudo half null follow-up in a way, as long as you can outspeed the enemy, and it can also give you plus 5 true damage per hit if you have got 2 or more bonus status effects on yourself, or if the foe has got 2 or more penalty status effects. And this true damage does get added into the AoE specials, which is a big thing, because even if you're not running Verge of Death because you don't want to lose your bulk, this can still help you on many of the AoE builds, and this can also help you if you just want to switch up the special of your units and you don't want to run a new skill for AoE nuking. So I really like it, and this is going to be the main skill for many of the cavaliers and flyers. For many of the infantry units, they do have access to many of the other skills, like the finish skills, so it is going to be competing with that, but it still has applications on many of the infantry units that don't want to get the healing out of the finish skill, or they just have a brave weapon like Tharja's. So let's go for the best users of it, and this can give you an idea on which units you can give the skill to. So easily one of the best users of this is going to be Ninja Korin. So she has a brave weapon just like Tharja. She's a magical unit. She wants to have the damage reduction piercing with resonance, and if you've invested heavily into her, then she can easily run inside attack speed, get 1 visible status effect, and then rely on her allies to get maybe another status effect going on herself so that she can get the true damage, and it really helps you with the nuking. And again, I do like it more than Flared Sparrow because the pre-combat damage has been nerfed quite a bit with Hathrin and also Breath of Life 4, and this can also be helpful on many of the infantry mages that want to run Resonance. So with Resonance, the finish skill has got pretty awkward synergy because finish skill gives you the healing and Resonance doesn't want you to get the healing in the combat. So Slice the Sparrow is a pretty good offensive way to get even more true damage on those kinds of units, and Brave Lysithea does come to mind. She does have a desperation weapon as well, and she is unfortunately going to be missing out on this in Holo forms. She can also run double Time Pulse forward to loop Luna and also pre-charge it. and you could also run this on a Brave unit like Brave Bernie. So she came with the Prime skill, which is really weird, and the only option she had got was Flared Sparrow, but now she's got Slice with Sparrow, and Paranoia status and the null follow-up status from her slot C is going to be enough to trigger its condition and give her the true damage on her quad attacks. So if you're a big Bernie fan, then this is going to be helpful, and you could also run this on many of the units with any kind of arcane weapon that gives you true damage. So you can try and stack up the true damage, and you can also run Emblem Seeker Drink to get the +1 movement as a status, and then run something like an Ode skill, or if you're having access to the expensive skills, then Air Orders 4. So that way you could have the 2 status effects, and this way you could hit really hard, and many of the range flyers and cavaliers don't really have many options, so this is one of the better ones. And on a lot of units that already give themselves the 2 visible status effects like Jill with her recent weapon refine, you could try and run this skill, and there's not much of a point of running an Excel skill on someone like her with a Desperation weapon, so this does help with momentum for the true damage stacking. And you could also run this on many of the mages that can run a Ploy skill, and again they run Resonance, so they don't want the healing out of the finish skill, and the Ploy skill is going to be debuffing the enemies for 2 status effects and Ploy and Exposure, so it easily triggers Slice with Sparrow. Coming back to Ninja Tharja, she is a strong Brave new, but I wish she had Null Guard or some true damage in her weapon, but still she makes up for it with the Anathema status, which is an underrated effect to use for tanking and also for just supporting your allies and becoming annoying for the enemy to initiate on. And because of that, she is going to be having uses in competitive game modes, in Aether Raids defense, and also in Summoner Duels. She pairs up really well with Ninja Lucina, who can help her pre-charge her special, and then you could even use something like an AoE special on her, which does help with the nuking. Overall, she is a really fun unit, and on a budget, if you're going to be building her up, then you can run Reposition and make sure to run a Squad A Sacred Seal, because 50 HP is the benchmark for Resonance to get all of the effects out of it, which is 60% damage reduction piercing and also 12 true damage. So you can run that with her HP and get all of the effects. And you can also run Emblem Celica to get more power on your specials, and also for the warping, which again can help you against the trench tile maps. And Defense for Smoke 3 is a decent slotsy skill for setting up the Pathfinder, but there are definitely better options like Shadow Shift and also Fatal Smoke 4. And she can try and run Miracle just like Ninja Lucina, and like I said, this does help against the shield fighter saviors, and it is easier for her to do it because she does have the special charges out of her weapon. Again, unfortunately, she doesn't have Null Guard, so any kind of guard effect on the enemy is going to be stopping you in the tracks, and that's why running her with Ninja Lucina can help you. And you can also run Odd Speed Wave to get the full null follow-up and also get the extra speed in the combat. She already gets the visible buff, so it is going to be overlapping a bit, but the extra speed that you get out of it is definitely going to be helpful. You could also try and run her with an AoE build. So this is something that is going to be needing a bit of support, but because of the special charges status, sometimes she can just charge it on her own, but it is going to be needing for her to survive the first combat to get these special charges. And she could run Emblem Marth with this kind of build, and Fatal Smoke 4 is also going to be helpful with an AoE build like this, and you could just run Life and Death. And keep in mind that even though we're not running Verge of Death, Slice with Sparrow does help you with the AoE specials as it gives you the true damage added to it. And at max investment, you can try and run her with Emblem Marth and Dragon Fang, so it becomes a 2 cooldown special that you could try and trigger with her special charges of her weapon. And Shadow Shift is a really nice lotsy skill that you could run because she has got the Canto Distant Traveled, so the better Canto Reach does allow you to position better with Shadow Shift. And if you want to hyper optimize her damage output, then you could technically run Fortress Echo. She already has the superior Canto in her weapon, but Fortress Echo is basically just going to be giving you +3 true damage, which I guess does help with the quad attacks, but yeah, unfortunately Cavaliers don't really have much of an option when it comes to an attuned skill. Ninja Diamant jumps into the battle as an Axe Infantryman at this time, so he has got Bold Kusarigama as his dual phase Brave Axe, and this does give him -1 special cooldown, making Boulder into a 2 cooldown special. And having this dual phase Brave weapon is such a big upgrade compared to base Diamant, who had a lot of trouble finishing off the enemies because of not having an easy way of getting a follow-up attack. And here, the Brave effect does help you tremendously, and also helps you have better player phase. And his weapon is always going to be active in the player phase, but in the enemy phase, he needs to be within 2 spaces of an ally, which in my opinion is a bit annoying. I wish this was at least 3 spaces, because 2 spaces is really limiting when it comes to the positioning and the kinds of support that you can run. And many times, if you want to go in with Ninja Diamant, if you don't make it back far enough into your team's range, then he's just going to be dying because his entire weapon is going to be disabled against the enemy. And I feel like that is going to be an important thing for something like Summoner Duels, because you would think that with the dual phase Brave effect and having Endless Tempest in his kit would make it so that he could try and function in the both phases, but unfortunately because of this effect, it is going to be a bit limiting, and that might come to bite him back in the future when we get Larother. So to himself in the combat, he's going to be getting extra stats depending on 5 plus 15% of the visible defense of his. So this is going to be anywhere from 13 to 14. He also gets true damage based on 25% of his defense, which is going to be helping with a dual phase Brave weapon for having better damage output. And he also gets flat damage reduction based on 25% of his defense, even against the AoE specials. And this is really important because Emblem Sigurd is one of the most oppressive units in the metagame right now, and Diamant has got really high defense naturally, and he also has the color advantage, and having this kind of flat damage reduction even against the AoE specials makes him a really good melee frontliner even against Emblem Sigurd, who hits so hard with his AoE special. And to both himself and the foe, he's going to be having the null damage reduction, and this is the damage reduction piercing on the regular damage reduction, which he doesn't really have in his weapon. Flat damage reduction is not pierceable, and he himself gets the full damage reduction piercing, so he doesn't really need to run something like Lagu's Friend or anything like that to get the piercing himself. And he also has the follow-up negation effect, and just like the base Diamant, the speed must be 25 or more to make follow-up attacks. So this is the fair fight effect essentially, and this can help you a lot when tanking, and this can be stacked up with other effects like the frozen status. So you will be needing a bit more support because sometimes units are going to be so fast that they're still going to be able to double him, and then he's going to be getting -1 special cooldown jump before his first attack in the player phase. So with this special jump, he's going to be able to trigger Boulder easily on his initiation on his Brave attack because of the Null Guard and Attack Defense Spiked Wall. Speaking of Spiked Wall, let's talk about some of the new skills that he comes with. So Boulder is basically going to be a defense variant of Gust that is going to be restricted to the infantry units, and it's just going to be helpful for many of the tanks that simply cannot run Gust, and they don't really have an equivalent of Godlike Reflexes for the defense yet. So this is pretty much their only option to get the unpierceable damage reduction, unless they want to run something like Pavis or Aegis, and it does scale off the damage based on 50% of your defense. And one of the best users of it, if not the best one, is going to be Brave Dimitri. So Boulder is incredibly good on any kind of unit that doesn't have -1 special cooldown weapon, because it means that you can run Lagu's Friend with Boulder, and Lagu's Friend does need your offensive special to be 3 cooldown or more. So Boulder is gonna be 3 cooldown without a -1 special cooldown weapon, and then you could run Emblem Ike for even more unpierceable damage reduction, and then you could stack up the flat damage reduction with Lagu's Friend and be really tanky. Again, unfortunately, he's gonna be missing out on this in the upcoming Holo forms, and this is also helpful on base Diamant. He can try and run this with Time Pulse Echo, and this way he's gonna be having a presence in the player phase and also in enemy phase. And reopening is a pretty good option for him because he already has the full damage reduction piercing, and he cannot really run Lagu's Friend with Boulder, and reopening does give you the flat damage reduction, which is really valuable compared to Attack Defense Spiked Wall, which doesn't give you as much flat damage reduction. So if you're a big Diamant fan, then this is definitely going to be a big win for you, and this could also be run on many of the Grail units that just do not have a -1 special cooldown weapon, so it actually works out in their favor. Nemesis does come to mind as he did get a weapon refine, which can help him stack a lot of stats, and he can also run Lagu's Friend easily with Boulder and be really tanky. He also comes with Attack Defense Spiked Wall, and it is going to be an upgrade of a Bulwark skill basically. So it still has the Bulwark Super Obstruct effect, which does help your team from not getting sniped by the high mobility units that we have got nowadays. And in the combat, it is going to be inflicting -4 attack and defense debuff on the foe. You also get true damage based on 15% of your greater defense or resistance. So it can actually work out for the dragons until you wait for the resistance variant of the skill. So at least you're going to be getting the true damage. And it also gives you the 7 flat damage reduction from foes' first attacks, including the brave hits. And then finally, it has got null guard. So this skill is tailor-made for Ninja Diamant. You are not going to be finding a better slot B for him right now, at least, compared to this skill. But it is going to be also a pretty nice option for some of the units that you don't necessarily want to run Lagu's Friend or Reopening on. And it is going to be a really good skill on many of the brave weapon users. So if you're running someone like Skahak with a Wyvern Katana Plus, because Arcane Elutineer just sucks, this is the better slow weapon, then you could try and run Attack Defense Spiked Wall. You cannot run Reopening as you're not going to be getting the full flat damage reduction and true damage out of it. And because of the null guard in this skill, you could try and run this with a Pled skill and try and trigger your specials like Boulder, which you can get at the same time. So many of the slow units, especially with arcane weapons, can try and run this skill as you're not going to be able to make use of Boulder with Lagu's Friend. And you could also run this on Nabata Altina. So I feel like she's kind of forgotten even though we got her this year itself. So again, she also doesn't want Reopening or Lagu's Friend. She wants to run her special, which already has the full damage reduction piercing. So this is going to be the perfect skill on her. And it can also be run on Winter Altina if you have heavily invested in her. And you could also try and run this on Brave Marth. He can get a lot of tools nowadays with Creation Pelts, with Null Counter Disrupt Echo, with D bonus doubler and No Quarter, giving him the full damage reduction piercing. And with Creation Pelts, he does have a way of combating the Scowl effect, and Attack Defense Spiked Wall can pretty much prevent your allies from getting sniped, and it's a pretty good skill that he could try and run, and it also gives him some true damage, which he does appreciate. Coming back to Ninja Diamant, he does have 48 base attack, which is gonna be having a super boon for him to hit really hard. And Diamant overall as a unit is gonna be a bit polarizing. Many times he can just be a checkmate unit, but other times he's just going to be folding depending on what kind of threat he's going to be facing. So I don't think he's going to be some kind of insane Omni tank because he is missing many tools that he would like on that kind of unit. But melee frontlining is something that you could try and do. And if you're going to be building him up on a budget, then I would highly suggest you to run Mystic Boost Sacred Seal. Think of the Sacred Seal as important to him as Oxygen is to you. This is absolutely something he needs because Brave Felix does have the Hexblade effect, and there are many of the other adaptive damage units, and Hexblade effect is not that uncommon nowadays, but mainly for Brave Felix, this is going to be needed to combat against him. With proper support, you could try and tank him, and without Mystic Boost, he's going to be targeting Diamant's incredibly low resistance, so that is absolutely not something you want as a melee frontliner. And you also get the healing after the combat, which he's kind of missing from this kit. And Emblem Marth could be run so that Boulder could become a 1 cooldown special, and this way you could still trigger this even against the Scowl effect in the player phase because of the special jumping that he gets out of his weapon. And you could also try and run him with Fortifications. That is a pretty fun skill because you could try and run Emblem Seaguard, and I say Emblem Seaguard over Endless Tempest because you need the Canto to come back to your teammates and live in the enemy phase, because again, you need allies in 2 spaces for the enemy phase for Diamant's weapon to be active. So Fortifications makes use of his dual phase brave weapon and enables you to set up the stone terrain for him, which makes him even more resilient to the AoE specials, which he already has the tool against with his flat damage reduction against it. So this is something you could try and get from Brave Alphonse, and you could also get Breath of Life 4 at the same time, which again helps you a lot against the AoE specials, and Diamant has got really high defense, so it does scale off based on it and does give you the healing, which is really helpful. And I really feel like you shouldn't be trying to replace his slot B skill because Reopening just is inferior to Spiked Wall because he has got a brave weapon. It doesn't really work all that well. Lagu's Friend is not needed as much as he already has the full damage reduction piercing, and you can only run Boulder with it. You would have to run something like Ignis and even Pavis if you want to go the full defensive route. So overall, I like the Spiked Wall quite a lot, and you could also try and run him as an Omni tank at high investment and max investment. Again, you're going to be needing some support like Seteth, who can give you even more flat damage reduction, and Time Pulse Echo can help you in the player phase for triggering Boulder on your Brave attack, as we're going to be running Emblem Ike for the unpierceable damage reduction. And if you're considering Diamant as an Omni tank, then D-Bonus Doubler is his best lot A skill. You just cannot afford to run Disencounter Melee Sacred Seal because of the Hexblade damage, and Mystic Boost is going to be the permanent stay for his kit, no matter the investment. Ninja Celine is a blue infantry mage with Scroll of Tease as her dual phase brave weapon. I would have expected a unit like her to have only the player phase brave effect, but dual phase brave weapon is definitely not bad, and she does have minus on special cooldown. She does have aerial maneuvers warping built into this weapon, so she can have the 2-space warping, which is kind of reminiscent of having Emblem Celica equipped on her in Engage. And this also helps your tanks because after you're done supporting them, Celine can just take matter into her own hands and clean up the remaining units with this kind of warping. At start of enemy phase, she also heals up 10 HP to herself and the allies in 3 spaces, and after the start of turn's effect have triggered on the enemy phase, she also cleanses herself and the allies in 3 spaces. Now keep in mind, this is the 3-space range compared to the 2-space range cleansing that Attuned Micaiah has got. This does act as an advantage in many scenarios, and especially helps her be future-proof when Larothra comes out and you'll have to make your tanks be 2 spaces away from your support unit. So this kind of 3-space range does help. But unlike Micaiah, she doesn't turn your debuffs into buffs. Instead, she cleanses any kind of stat debuffs, and she also cleanses the first 2 penalty status effects. So this is the same cleansing as Attuned Micaiah, and the priority list is going to be deciding which 2 penalty status effects are going to be getting cleansed. So we already know this with Attuned Micaiah, it is going to be working the same, and Panic and Exposure are going to be at the top, and something like Frozen is going to be all the way at the bottom. And if you're wondering, yes, running both Attuned Micaiah and Ninja Celine does make it so that you could cleanse 4 status effects on your allies. But for competitive players, both of these units are going to be used in different teams in Summer Duels S, and in Aether Raids, they can be used in different seasons, or one of them could be used in Aether Raids defense, the other one in Aether Raids offense. So Celine is going to be cleansing the allies, which is a really important support effect, and she also gives +4 speed and resistance to the allies in combat. So again, it does help a lot of the fast tanks just speed stack a bit more, and she also allows them to heal 10 HP after the combat. So we already know how good the cleansing is, and I guess if you're not super competitive, then Celine is not going to be the first unit that you need to summon if you already have Attuned Micaiah. Then Celine has got some of the in-combat effects, and this weapon is always going to be active in the player phase, where mainly she's going to be acting, and in the enemy phase, she needs to be in 3 spaces of an ally to activate it. This is a bit weird because Ninja Diamant doesn't get the same luxury of being 3 spaces away from an ally for enemy phase triggering, but Celine, who doesn't have any kind of flat damage reduction in her weapon and is usually not going to be taking on the enemies head on, still gets it. But in any case, having the 3-space range does make her more flexible, and she's able to get extra stats in the combat depending on 5 plus 15% of her visible speed. So this is going to be Omni 13 or 14 a lot of the times. And then she has got true damage based on 6 multiplied with number of allies with more than half health, and this can go up to max 18, which is actually really good for a brave weapon, and this is not going to be added to your AoE specials. So Ninja Celine can hit incredibly hard with her 44 base attack with a super boon, and then she has got the true damage, and she does have enough speed to quad attack many of the units with her base 47 speed, which cannot really be said for Attuned Micaiah, and she is going to be getting compared to her quite a lot because of the kind of cleansing that she provides. She is still going to be a side grade to Attuned Micaiah in many scenarios. Attuned Micaiah does have Yune's Protection as her slot B, which can debuff the enemies and also inflict them with the exposure and the discord status, and she doesn't even have to try and compete with the resistance of her enemies to trigger those debuffs on the enemies. So that is a big thing, and she relatively has a free slot C because of having Omni Guidance built in her weapon. So she's one of the best units to carry Breath of Life 4 in her kit for her allies. And Ninja Celine will have to pick between either running the Ploy skill or Breath of Life for her allies. But Ninja Celine is an infantry unit, so she has got the advantage of having counter control, and that is going to be a big thing for Aether Raids defense and summoner duels. And Ninja Celine can actually kill more units because of having the dual phase brave effect and also having true damage, where Micaiah is going to be struggling. Attune Micaiah needs to run Astra as her special, and no, I'm not joking, that's an actual thing she will have to do with Emblem Marth, and she will have to try and pre-charge it, whereas Celine can just make use of Miracle with the tempo and easily try and kill Duo Fiorm. And she also has 3 space cleansing over the 2 space cleansing of Micaiah, so that could come in handy in some of the matchups and scenarios for tanking. Overall, I do prefer Attune Micaiah as a unit, but again, having both of them is not going to be hurting if you're going to be really competitive. She is overall a really solid unit, excelling in her combat because of having a brave weapon and true damage, and also providing invaluable support to her allies in the cleansing that she can do. She is going to be running something like Stillwater on very budget as the Sacred Seal because you need that extra resistance, and you could try and run Speed Resistance Finish 3 from Yulia in the normal summon pool. You could also run Stillwater, but that is going to be in the Grail pool on Tea-Time Tail 2, and Emblem Marth could be a pretty nice thing with Iceberg, making it a 1 cooldown Iceberg, which you could trigger on your brave attack with the help of the tempo skill that she has got, and its null guard is always going to be welcomed with a brave weapon like this. And if you're going to be giving her some of the fodder from Divine Codes, then you could run the finish scale for the true damage and some in combat healing. And again, Iceberg could be run with Emblem Marth, but you could also try and run Flare, but because of her massive resistance, Iceberg is going to be overall doing more damage. And you could try and run Stillwater as the Sacred Seal, but a squad is Sacred Seal that can boost up your speed and resistance both is also something you could try and run. I do like plus speed IV on her, but if you're going to be ascending her IV, it depends on which route you want to take her. If you want to make her more offensive, then plus attack is going to be the obvious choice with the super boon. But if you want her to support with some of these skills, then resistance might be an option. And she could definitely try and run Speed Resistance Discord and Crystalline Water from Rion Marianne. And Crystalline Water is going to be helping you with 2 of the skills that check for the resistance, and the Discord skill is another way of her providing the support. Unfortunately, it overlaps too heavily with the debuffs of her default ploy skill, so I guess you could try and run maybe some different ploy skill for the attack debuff. Discord skill is not only good for the extra support, but it also helps Celine herself because she can have a lot of speed debuff on the enemy and also the resistance debuff, which works really well with her brave weapon, and she also gets true damage based on 15% of her resistance. So again, that is always good with a brave weapon for hitting even harder, and Celine here can already get 18 true damage with her brave weapon, so stacking it up does help. You can also take her the offensive route because her combat potential is definitely there, and she could try and be aggressive and bloodthirsty like her Feld Xenologue version in Engage. So you could try and run Slice to Sparrow for getting the true damage, and again, this is really helpful on a brave weapon. You also get the true damage out of the exposure debuff from her ploy skill, and you also run Speed Resistance Finish as the Sacred Seal. And Time Pulse Echo is something you could try and run with Emblem Marth Glacies. So you're going to be triggering Glacies on your brave attack, and that is going to be happening because of the Null Guard in her tempo. And if you want to use her in Aether Raids offense for tanking purpose, then Breath of Life 4 is something that you could try and run. You could also run this on some other unit like your core Mythic, but you could just try and compress the role of Celine with Breath of Life, and then you could run a Ruse skill for more support. There are not too many options. You could run the Discord skill, but it is going to be worthless in the Astra season as you might be facing Freyr and he's just going to be cleansing any of the ploy and the Discord debuffs. So for Astra tanking, a Ruse skill, which is the middle of the turn debuff, can be more helpful from the Divine Codes. She's also really helpful in the Aether Raids defense Dark Season, where you could try and cleanse your team and also provide the counter control support, which you can try and run in her slot C. And like I was saying, in Summoner Duels, she does have an advantage over Attune Micaiah when it comes to the combat against Duo Fiorm, as she doesn't need to pre-charge her special. She just needs to make sure that Miracle is at 2 cooldown, and because of the Null Guard in her weapon, she is going to be able to charge this and live Duo Fiorm and then kill her with quad attacking. So again, that's the thing which a lot of the ninja units can do, and Celine does have a bit more power with her true damage in her weapon, and your best bet is going to be trying to stack up the true damage with Slice to Sparrow, and Firm Counter Curb is going to be absolutely needed if she's going to be used in Summoner Duels or in Aether Raids defense. That is again one of her big advantages over Attune Micaiah, and not something that she could do. And she actually doesn't need any kind of pulse support, because with Emblem Marth and Time Pulse Echo, you could have a 2 cooldown Miracle, so she can easily trigger it. But if you don't have Time Pulse Echo to feed to her, then you could definitely try and give her any kind of support, which is not really all that hard, being an infantry unit. So she's got a lot of options when it comes to supporting your allies and doubling down on it. And for slottage, she also has a couple of options with Crystalline Water, Finish Skill, and at this kind of insane investment, Slice to Sparrow as well. Ninja Noire is the free-to-play unit out of this batch as the Tempest Trial reward, and she's a colorless dagger infantry unit with Giant Shuriken Plus as the inedible weapon. We finally got an inedible Brave Dagger, so this does have the player phase Brave effect, and if the unit initiates combat or if they're in 2 spaces of an ally, then you get +5 to all of your stats in the combat, and you also have the full tempo effect, which is huge because if you're going to be running this on a Cavalier or a Flyer, then they're not going to be having easy access to tempo effect without it, and tempo effect with the Brave effect is actually really strong, as you can try and trigger lethality a lot more easily and even on your Brave attack. So I'm a big fan of this weapon. I genuinely think that this might be better than the 2 Arcane Daggers on a lot of the high attack dagger units, but yeah, make sure that your dagger unit actually has a high attack stat. Otherwise, you're going to be doing 0 times 4. And you might be thinking her stat spread looks a bit similar, and you would be right. She is really similar to Metody. In fact, they've got the same offenses. This is that Metody has got a bit more HP, Noire has got a bit more resistance. Doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things. And both of them are going to be facing competition from Pern, who does have a preferred weapon that is a player phase Brave Dagger, which also gives him the special charges and some support to himself and his allies. So even though Noire comes with an inedible Brave Dagger, it is still not going to be as good as his weapon. And Pern's weapon gives him a bit more speed because it has got +3 speed built in it, whereas you can only refine Giant Shuriken Plus, and then Pern has got a bit higher might at 9 might, whereas Giant Shuriken is at 7 might. So Noire is definitely workable if you like her a lot, but I wish that she was maybe a red dagger infantry unit. If you're going to be running Noire on a budget, then you could try and run Fury 3 as her slot A, as she doesn't really have any kind of HP threshold with her weapon, and you could run Emblem Marth to have a 1 cooldown Moonbow, which you could trigger on your Brave attack because of the tempo effect. So that is going to be needed even on this kind of budget build because the seal skill is extremely awful. And if you cannot give this to her, then at least you could provide her the null follow-up support as the status effect with many of her allies. And Blade Session can be the Sacred Seal to maximize her offenses, as she's mainly going to be functioning in the player phase. You could also try and make a pretty optimal build with all of the fodder available in the Divine Codes. So Lethality could be run, and with Emblem Marth, it is going to be a 3 cooldown special, and then with Time Pulse 4, it becomes a 2 cooldown special, which you're going to be able to trigger with Flash Sparrow and the tempo effect in her weapon on your Brave attack. So that is going to be really powerful, and Flash Sparrow is the perfect slotty skill for giving her these special charges and abusing the tempo built in Giant Shuriken. And Physical Null Follow-Up ends up becoming a really good slot piece skill for giving her the full Null Follow-Up, and also some damage reduction piercing on her initial hit, where she's not going to be triggering lethality, and if she gets scowled, then this can also give you some backup damage reduction piercing. Time Pulse 4 is going to be needed to consistently trigger Deadeyes, but if you don't have tier 4 version of it, then even version 3 of it could be run. And I guess you could also try and run Arcane Tempest on her. Technically it's an option, so I'm just showcasing this, but overall I prefer Giant Shuriken Plus way more on her. So you could just try and copy all of Rearmed Sword skills and run Lethality with Emblem Sigurd. Tempo could be run in her Sacred Seal, as she's not going to be having that in her weapon. And Potent Disarm is only something I would recommend with Arcane Tempest. I don't think it's really worth it with Giant Shuriken Plus. The other skills like Lethality, Finish 4, and Pledge are still helpful with a Giant Shuriken build, so you're still going to be benefiting if you fodder Rearmed Sword to her. And you could also try and run an AoE build with Arcane Tempest. as it's much easier to set up and pre-charge an AoE special, so she could try and do it as she does have the attack stat for it. Metady can also do it, so she can also do it, but overall, I do prefer running Giant Shuriken Plus, and a level up of the Divine Codes build, which I showcased before, is going to be a build like this with Pulse Mog. So you could run Time Pulse Echo in her Attune skill, and this way you're still going to be able to consistently trigger lethality. And Pulse Mog is going to be a pretty nice player phase expensive option that is going to be giving you the scowl effect, so that does come into the play when you're going to be quad attacking. And it also has the guard effect, so along with the full tempo of Giant Shuriken, this is going to be preventing any kind of special trigger of the enemy. And then you could pulse down the foes and also debuff them. And if you want to stack up a lot of true damage like the other ninja units, then Slice of Sparrow from her mother is something that you could try and run along with Assassin Strike. So you do have some true damage stacking there, and you could try and run Pledge in the slot C because we need the special charges in any kind of way with Giant Shuriken Plus for consistently triggering lethality. So you could try and do that with Time Pulse Echo, and you're going to be needing some kind of null follow-up if you want her to quad attack. She kind of does have the guaranteed follow-up attack out of Slice of Sparrow to make use of, but another status effect is going to be helping her with the true damage condition of the slot A skill. I want to thank all of my team members for their constant support, and you can click the link on the screen right now to check out my breakdown of this month's weapon refines, and make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell because YouTube sub boxes are about as functional as Noire when it comes to being different stat spread wise to Metady. So with that said, let's see you guys next time. Thank you so much for watching and have a great day.